Direct Connection is made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities and is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you. Live from Maryland Public Television, this is Direct Connection with Jeff Salkin.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in for Direct Connection. Coming up tonight, it's not CPR, but another way that bystanders can learn to save a life. That is ahead. First tonight, how private is your online data? Whether it's on Facebook or other sites, that is in the news lately. Joining us to talk about it is Furman de Brabander, a professor of philosophy at the Maryland Institute College of Art. Professor, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So two things seem to be happening in the news centered around Facebook. Facebook, apparently its app has been lifting more data from people's cell phones than they knew, their call records, their text logs. Secondly, some companies, namely Cambridge Analytica, have been able to scrape all this data out of Facebook for tens of millions of people, use it for political advertising, that sort of thing. How big a deal is this?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say. Part of me wants to say that it is a very big deal because people are giving away their privacy and Facebook is helping them or coaxing them. On the other hand, we've been doing this for a very long time, and people are getting more and more accustomed to this. I would argue that the greatest fault in this whole incident is not Facebook, but it is us, the user. I mean, Facebook's business model has been well known for a long time.
And the business model is we give you this free service.
That's right.
And we sell you targeted advertising that's based on all this data that we now know everything about.
Well, more than that, back in 2014, they did an experiment which was publicized where they sent positive news feeds to certain personality types and negative news feeds to other personality types. And they noticed when social media use went up or down, and they knew how to manipulate us. They've known this for quite a while.
And so that's the whole key. It's not just their business, it's any social media outfit. That's and Google as well, right? Who are the big players here?
Well, Twitter and Google and Facebook for sure. Those are the big three, absolutely.
All right, now as an individual, what do I care if they know how to sell me on toothpaste?
Well, the biggest concern for Facebook would be the revelations that are coming out with the Cambridge Analytica incident are that user data was taken from Facebook users without their knowledge and from their friends. They compiled profiles on 50 million people, and the charges are that data was then redirected back at the U.S. population during the 2016 election to influence them or manipulate them to vote accordingly. We don't know the full extent of that or the nature of that. That's coming out of the Mueller investigation. But what is unsettling about this is that your private data could be used against you to manipulate you, and that you would lose your freedom and autonomy in the process.
It's amazing to me, and I just read this recently, that if you get one of these grocery store discount cards and you go and buy Fruit Loops, whatever it is, the big data mining operation somewhere knows that, but also can somehow link it to your Facebook, your Twitter, and so forth.
I mean, the short of it is that we do not know what they know about us. We do not know what they want to know about us. We do not know what they plan on doing with the data they collect on us. It's kind of an esoteric science, if you will. There's a company in Canada, Canadian Tire, their equivalent of Walmart. They determined through their research that customers who buy felt pads for their couches, for their furnitures, are a good credit. They're good for giving credit cards to. So we don't, you wouldn't even think about these kinds of things, but the scientists have figured out that there's certain things that they need to hit on. Like if you fill out your loan application in all capital letters, that's an indication, or that you're going to be delinquent, actually.
Your caps lock button may be stuck.
Right.
It could be also.
You don't know what they're looking for.
Based on your depth of knowledge and interest about this, I'm guessing you're completely offline. You're pad and paper, never look at the internet.
I have 4 kids, and they have cell phones, and this is not. No, of course. This is the name of the game, and my position is that we have to get used to living our lives in the public glare, which is kind of a strange point because I think we already have. I mean, everyone is waiting to see how people will react to this Facebook scandal. I kind of already suspect that people will forget it and move on, because this is the price of admission to social media and digital technology. You have to give up your private information in order to use them, in order to avail yourselves of the full menu of benefits and privileges.
And why is that a good deal for most people? Why do they see that as a slam dunk?
I don't know if it's a good deal, but the conveniences are incredible. The benefits are just outrageous and outlandish. I can't imagine on a Friday night now I go out for a restaurant, I have to check it on Yelp, and Yelp knows where I am, and Yelp will give me directions, and then I use Waze to get there, which is another app which knows where I am, the GPS, at any given time, and it helps me to navigate the traffic. I use that on my way over here to beat the traffic.
Do you do anything differently with your device, your kids' devices, just based on what you know about all this?
I do not, because I am pretty ignorant.
So you've surrendered.
I'm pretty ignorant.
So if you were better technically, you're a very good political philosopher.
Right.
If you were a better engineer, you might do something different.
One of the interesting studies I've read is that after the NSA incident with Snowden, even people who were very knowledgeable of technology, they by and large did not make many changes or significant changes. So even people who are in the know don't seem to make too many changes. This is our digital economy, which I often call our surveillance economy. This is this is the way the game is played.
Let me remind our viewers, if you have a question about the surveillance economy, Facebook and beyond, give us a call. We'll have the number up on the screen. You could also tweet your questions conveniently by Twitter. The Twitter account is @MPT News. So how do the Russians figure into all of this? The idea that perhaps they were in the vanguard of taking advantage of some of this information to attempt to influence our election. Do you think it made a dent?
Absolutely. I mean, they paid attention to how Facebook operates. That experiment I mentioned a little while ago, the 2014 experiment, they saw what the result of that was. Facebook noticed that if they want people to use their social media apps, they need to flood us with only positive stories and not negative ones. And so the result of that is during the 2016 election, people started noticing, and me included, that your Facebook feeds were entirely positive stories that reaffirmed your worldview. And I have cousins who are the opposite political persuasion of mine. I haven't seen their Facebook posts in months. Facebook is, curating my site. And what happened is that that these fake news stories that originate in places like Moldova, I believe it was Moldova. It was one of the former Soviet republics. They were spread. They flooded Facebook, and according to your persuasion, they landed on your Facebook site. So for people who were conservative-leaning, there was a fake news story by the Denver Guardian, which is a fake newspaper, saying that Hillary Clinton was behind the death of a suspicious death of an FBI officer. And that kind of emboldened them. For liberal people, there was a story that came out on their Facebook feed saying that the Pope had endorsed Donald Trump. Now, that wasn't positive, of course, that was negative, but the point being that would then maybe discourage them from voting.
Wow. It's completely changed the world. Just the idea that you have the echo chamber where
Yes.
you're only being fed the information that fits with your worldview.
It really is an echo chamber, and the problem is polarization. Everybody's in their own camps, and they're radicalized and isolated. And I would also point out that after the Parkland shooting a few weeks ago, these Russian trolls appeared again, and they sent out all these tweets that were either rabidly pro-gun control or rabidly pro-gun rights, just to make the cacophony louder and the divisiveness greater.
So just making noise.
Just making noise,
for the sake
but
of...
also make us feel that we are not united, that we're at each other's throats, because trust is, of course, a huge element in a democracy. And if you can undermine that, you'd go a long way to undermining the sense of a common cause.
That's fascinating. Is there a way to retaliate?
Well, I think that you're going to have to, there are ways to do this. I don't know about retaliate, but respond, I would say.
Can we, we wouldn't play that game, would we?
Well, we already have in some ways. The United States, this is, of course, I'm not sure I exactly agree with this line of argument, but the argument from the Russians is that the United States has been one of the major sources of political influence in other elections throughout the last 50 years. We just have done it differently. And so they say your chickens have now come home to roost.
So we have the Voice of America radio Marte, whatever it was, pumping into Cuba.
Exactly. They did not appreciate that.
Let's take a phone call. Prince George's County. This is Jack. Jack, thanks for calling. Go ahead.
Yeah. You had mentioned that Facebook was curating who you actually saw in your friends to two different groups. And one of the things our society has become left and right, if you will. Do you think that Facebook could be contributing to this at any great amount?
Well, I think the short answer is that they are contributing to our polarization. I think that is the one thing that Mark Zuckerberg should be most embarrassed about and most upset about. He doesn't need to be embarrassed about the data breach with Cambridge Analytica because there was no data breach. He said it himself. They gave them that information. They allowed them to do this. But allowing the polarization runs directly against their more honored claims, right? Facebook says that this is a new public space. This is a new public square. This is where people from all different kinds and from all over the world and all different backgrounds can come together. And now look what's happening. Because their algorithm is working in order to reinforce our social media use, they are fragmenting us into different camps where we don't see each other and communicate.
But they're not doing that out of meanness. They're doing it because of the bottom line, the quarterly profit report.
That's how they get us to use their services, but also that's how they get us to share more, because that's what they want us to do. The more we use it, the more we share. And we learned with the Cambridge Analytica incident, all we need to do to share is like things. I like things all the time. And this seems like a very benign activity, but apparently that's what they think they learn the most about us from.
So should one have an alter ego that I don't know, a profile with a pseudonym or something?
I'm too busy with my own ego.
So just playing along. But, I mean, how should people think about it? I mean, just understanding this stuff when you go look at social media helps.
Well,
what do your students think?
My students are very funny. That's how I got into this topic, because the younger generation is very different. I was yelling at them about Edward Snowden and the NSA, and they couldn't seem to care as much. They would listen to me. I have great students. They're very polite. But they would say to me, you know, we don't really understand why this matters. And so that really made me think about this hard. The younger generation is, of course, we call them digital natives. They are accustomed to sharing, you know, as a matter of course. I don't want to say that they're irresponsible, because I find that my students are very concerned. I've also noticed among my students, young people, that they are very suspicious of the intentions of Silicon Valley.
Interesting. Good. Glad to hear it. Let's take one more phone call. Lewis, Delaware, this is Julian. Julian, thanks for the call. Go ahead.
Well, I'd like to understand how the American public can be so gullible as to believe these Facebook feeds or tweets that come their way.
That's a great question. Thanks so much.
Sure. Thank you.
Because we all get like the Nigerian scam email, and it's so obvious what it is. These aren't, or some of them are?
I don't know what to say to that. I mean, this is the main question that I go over and over in my head. You know, I think people divulge because they are just so enamored by all that Facebook has to offer. You can connect with people from so far back. It's also a huge diversion. Who's not flipping through their Facebook page just to kill some time? So there's a variety of enticements that make us overlook that.
Not me. I'm actually not on Facebook.
I wish I may have to get off it.
Maybe I should join. I'll have two different personalities. Furman DeBray-Banders, a professor at the Maryland Institute College of Art. This was fun. Come back sometime.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just ahead tonight, new efforts to help crime victims. We'll be right back.
Got an unused vehicle going nowhere? Donate it to the one place that can take you any place. Visit mpt.org/vehicles and support the programs you love on MPT.
The MPT app puts our programs right at your fingertips, so you can choose when to watch, what to watch, wherever you want to watch it. Download it now.
What happens in Japan and Asia matters to me. And with NHK World's newsroom in Tokyo, I get the news live from Japan right at the start of my day.
New ideas come out of Asia all the time. NHK Newsline reports on business, technology, and world events from Tokyo to Bangkok.
Once in the morning gives me a heads up on the competition.
Every hour on the hour, the news I want from Asia.
Watch NHK World now on Comcast Channel 268 and Verizon Channel 480.
Are you turning 70 and a half this year? If so, you generally have to start spending down your retirement account. Even the minimum distribution can place you in a sticky situation. Luckily, you can now use your IRA to make tax-free gifts. Gifts up to $100,000 will never count as income, but always make a difference. That's icing on the cake.
Make your gift for this year before December 31st. Visit mpt.org/support.
This is a box that showed you a world beyond your own. It was just a box, but the world has changed, and so have we. And now the box can be almost any size or shape. And you decide what you want to explore. Anytime, any place. Break out of the box with PBS.
In the studio for our Your Health segment tonight are Dr. Habiba Park, Associate Professor at the University of Maryland School of Medicine and Critical Care Surgeon at the R. Adams Cowley Shock Trauma Center, and Dr. Sharon Henry, the Ann Scalea Professor of Trauma Surgery and Director of Wound Healing at Shock Trauma. Thanks to both of you for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
So I was thinking there have been two major developments in terms of saving lives over my lifetime. The advent of CPR training for civilians and what was pioneered at your institution, Shock Trauma, the Critical Care Trauma Center. What you're working on now is really a third major program called Stop the Bleed. What's the purpose of it?
Stop the Bleed is exactly what it sounds like. When people get injured and they begin to bleed, they can die before help arrives. And what we are trying to do is empower people who are there on the scene, the people who are bystanders, to jump in and start to help before help actually arrives. At Shock Trauma, you see a lot of gunshot cases. Is that all exclusively what we're talking about?
No, I think that's one of the things that make this so adaptable to so many situations, is that it was initially created from the Sandy Hook massacre. But the skills that we teach are applicable to any situation where bleeding is a problem, where we think that there's life-threatening bleeding. So that could be a car accident, it could be a construction incident, car accidents being one of the major, also one of the other big major causes of injury and death. I actually keep a kid in my car. Any home incidents, cooking incidents, so you name it. If there's any situation where potential bleeding could be a problem, you can use these skills.
How does a bystander who's not a trained paramedic know if it's critical, life-threatening bleeding?
Bleeding that accumulates. So if you see a puddle forming, you see a large quantity of blood, that tells you it's major. Or if it's spurting, if you see blood spurting up out of a wound, that's a major wound. Sometimes you can tell because the person isn't responsive, because they're going into shock and they're not awake and aware and they're not talking to you. Those are all signs that there's serious bleeding.
How fast do you have to move? How much time do you have in these situations?
You can have minutes. I mean, you can bleed out in 5 minutes from a bad arterial bleed.
And you see it at Shock Trauma, where people get to you really fast, but not fast enough.
We see it, that happens. And when people arrive to the trauma center alive and with vital signs, we have a much better shot at saving their lives than when they come in without vital signs.
This is it's a 1-hour course. We're going to give everybody the 3-minute demo, but before we do that, let me ask the question that I bet everybody's thinking about, which is, with blood, there's sort of the ick factor and there's the HIV factor. That unless you happen to be carrying surgical gloves around, people would be really reluctant to dive into that pool of blood. How do you answer that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So sometimes we have the commercially made kits that come with gloves, because obviously our number one goal is to promote an environment of safety. We never ask anybody to put themselves into harm's way. Always assess the situation and make sure that it's safe. And it's really up to that person's judgment. If they want to put themselves at risk of exposure to potential bloodborne diseases, then that's really, you're weighing that against the risk of potentially losing someone's life. I've heard people even try basic things like trying plastic bags over their hands if they have them available. Gloves obviously are the better way to go. Always wash your hands afterwards to remove any risk of exposure, and call 911 or get help if you do have an actual exposure to an open wound with blood.
Okay, so what we're about to do is going to be like the 3-minute version of a CPR course, which is not good for a whole lot, but maybe good for something. And we encourage people to take the full 1-hour course, and we can talk about it. So you brought with you this plastic, oddly shaped body part with a bad wound.
Yeah, this is the model that we use to help teach the course, and it has a variety of types of wounds. This is more like a puncture wound, and then it has more of sort of a laceration, and then another sort of puncture wound. And it teaches several things. We always start with the first thing you do to help control bleeding is pressure. You have to push hard. And one of the things that people are always surprised about is how hard you have to push to be able to stop bleeding. So you have to put your body weight into it, lean into it.
Is it going to stop, or are you pushing until the paramedics get there?
You want the blood to stop. If the bleeding doesn't stop, then you have to escalate your maneuvers, meaning you'll go on to try another maneuver, which may be packing. And what we brought here is a commercial gauze that is impregnated with material to help blood clot. And you can use this or a plain gauze. If you don't have either of those, you can use material. You can use your shirt. You can use anything.
Whatever you got.
Whatever you got available. And the idea is you want to get the packing material down to the base of the wound. So the bleeding's not going to stop if you just put it on top. You got to get all the way down to the bottom and pack in as much as you can get in to tamponade. Essentially, what you're going to do is plug the dike. You're going to be the Dutch boy with your finger in the dike, making the bleeding stop.
And so we're not worried whether it's sterile or not at this point.
No, at this point you're saving a life. So you worry about infection later, so absolutely not.
And we're going to talk about a tourniquet, but does elevation help?
Elevation helps.
If it's a limb or something,
if it's a limb, you can elevate the limb. That will decrease the amount of blood that's flowing to that area. So yes, absolutely, elevation will help.
Okay, pros and cons of putting a tourniquet on. How do you decide?
Yeah, well, there are a couple of things to remember about a tourniquet. It can help and it can hurt. The thing people worry about the most is causing an amputation. You're cutting the blood supply off to the area. And if the blood supply is cut off for too long, that can result in ischemia, which is loss of blood flow, and can result in an amputation. The other thing that can happen is you put it on too loose and it doesn't do the job it's supposed to do, or it increases venous bleeding. So one of the things that surprises everybody who takes this course is how tight that has to be to stop arterial blood flow. Everybody's had their blood drawn, and you know what a venous tourniquet feels like when you get your blood drawn. That hurts, right?
Yeah.
This hurts more because it's tighter.
Okay, so that goes over the plastic.
So you want to put this above the area of injury. So let's say.
So between the heart, you know where the heart is, the bleeding's here,
it's got to go in the middle. So if this is the injury you're trying to control, and this is where the heart is, and the legs are this way, has to go above.
Right, so you want to put at least a couple of inches above the site of injury. This sort of is one size fits all, military grade tourniquet, because these are the ones that research has proven to be effective. You cinch it down as tight as it'll go. Then you tighten the rod until you have control of bleeding. So you should be able to see the bleeding stop. And then you're able to wrap the Velcro around all the way, fasten it into place. And then a lot of these will come with a time mark on it because we like to know how long the tourniquet's been on. we try to keep it within a 2-hour time frame.
So in real life, no civilian's going to have one of those, but it used to be cloth and a stick. Does that work?
Go ahead.
So actually, studies have been done comparing improvised tourniquets to military-grade ones, and there's a lot of issues with using improvised ones that could potentially lead to more loss of blood, and potentially loss of life, creating it. Issues with tightness and keeping it a consistent tightness, that bleeding stays controlled. A lot of times you'll lose that. So oftentimes we found that bleeding continues as opposed to stopping.
Okay, before we run out of time, people who feel like they ought to get trained, how can they get more information?
Go to our website, which is mdcot.com, and we have the courses listed on there. You can also go to bleedingcontrol.org, which is a national website, to also find courses as well.
Doctors, thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Very interesting, very helpful. We appreciate it. Coming up Thursday at this time on Your Money and Business, a local college that won big on the court is hoping to convert that into new prosperity for the school. Join us Thursday at 7. Thank you for watching Direct Connection, and have a good night.
Your health segments are a co-production of Maryland Public Television and the University of Maryland Medical System.
This program was made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities.